News for the mass. No spin, no bias, just news. This is ISEA 2.3. Your news, our business. Delivering nothing but the truth. News now.
Broadcasting live from Manila, Philippines. Good afternoon, Philippines. Good afternoon, Manila. It's a sunny day, February 30, 2022. This is Juliana Reyes, serving you the hottest and the most leading news of the hour. Latest news spotted only here on ISEA Point 29 News, giving you the latest and most credible news for today. The headlines. The dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, announced a special military operation. Russia launched a military invasion in Ukraine. The military conflict in Ukraine began in early 2014 and quickly developed into a lengthy standoff, with frequent shelling and skirmishes along the front line separating Russian and Ukrainian-controlled border territory in the east. Since Russia launched a full-scale military invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, the conflict has resulted in over 100 civilian deaths and tens of thousands of Ukrainians fleeing to neighboring countries, including Poland, a NATO member that U.S. forces are set to assist. Russia's invasion was a planned strike, while many nations and international observers want the assault to stop. It is easy to predict when their desires will be fulfilled. It may be inferred that Russia will strike in 2022 for various vague reasons. There have been numerous causes for Russia's aggressiveness against Ukraine throughout history. Here is Aubrey Lema to give us details.
Thank you so much, Leon. The dictator of Russia, Vladimir Putin, announced a special military operation on February 24, 2022. A major crisis in Europe has been triggered by the tensions between Russia and Ukraine. It has not been seen since the end of the Cold War. Ukraine ties with Europe and the United States have improved in recent years. As a result, Russian threats have intensified. The ostensible reasons for Russia's invasion of Ukraine includes the demilitarization and the Nazification of Ukraine, Vladimir Putin's apparent denials of Ukraine's independence, Sergei Lavrov, Russian diplomat and politician, said that one of the major objectives of Russia is Ukraine denazification. Putin said, "To this aim, we will attempt to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine, as well as bring to justice those who perpetrated multiple heinous crimes against civilians, including against members of the Russian Federation." Additionally, he has charged that Badarites and neo-Nazis have erected large weapons and utilized civilians as human shield in Ukrainian cities. According to historians, the term denazification is being misused by Putin. Timothy Sender, expert on Ukraine, argues that only German can be Nazis. You cannot denazify when there are no Nazis. Sergei Lavrov, Russia's foreign minister, said the goal of demilitarizing Ukraine is a crucial part of Moscow's justification for its special military operation. He stated in an interview with Al Jazeera that particular types of strike weapons must be identified which would never be deployed in Ukraine and will not be manufactured. Putin claims that the country's military poses a threat to Russia and is governed by neo-Nazis. He declared that he has made the decision to conduct a special military action and demanded that Ukraine should demilitarize in order for them to have normalization with Russia's Peking to the nation in a televised speech. Putin promised to work toward demilitarizing the nation, but would not seek invade it. However, according to Georgy Tikvi, a spokesman for the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the goal for Russia's offensive military operation is to destroy the Ukrainian state, capture Ukrainian territory by force, and establish occupation control. Despite Ukraine's desire to join NATO, Russia is opposed to that idea because Russia's worries that NATO forces will be stationed near its borders. If Ukraine joins alliances, the Kremlin reaffirmed its assertion that Russian forces invaded because of the potential threat of NATO expansion on December 17, 2021. Vladimir Putin demanded that no former Soviet states such as Ukraine be added to NATO and that NATO cease all military cooperation in Eastern Europe. For more than 10 years, Kyiv has raged against NATO's relentless advance into Russia's borders. He seems to have come to the conclusion that all alliances closer ties with Ukraine, a non-NATO member, are final straw. They said that Putin demanded that NATO should prohibit the admission of any new members from the former Soviet Union, particularly in Ukraine. He also said that NATO should withdraw its forces for some countries bordering Russia, the response of NATO and the United States, as they flatly rejected the demand to forbid any new members. In terms of Ukraine's independence, Russia has never felt at ease with Ukraine's independence. Is an understatement. Putin claims that Ukraine is not a country but a historical part of Russia and appears to be deeply ingrained with the minds of Russian leadership. Vladimir Putin reportedly claimed that Ukraine is not even a state. What is Ukraine? A part of its territory is in Eastern Europe, but not part a considerable one. It was gift from us. He also claimed in an interview dated February 2022 that Russians and Ukrainians are one and the same people. I am Overlema for ISEA 29 News, your partner in international news.
Up next, an expert analyzes who has actual jurisdiction over the territory. Here is Aubrey Almuete to discuss her insights.
At the time of the conflict between Russia and the West over Ukraine earlier this year, Europe was experiencing its worst crisis since the Cold War ended. And now that Russia has unexpectedly invaded Ukraine, I think there's a lot of chance, or there is a huge chance that the conflict will spread to a NATO member state. And I think that would likely result in a conflict between the two nuclear superpowers of the globe and a wider war in Europe. And hopefully that will not happen, because we know how war can terribly be. So I must say that this invasion of Ukraine by Russia in 2022 was against the international law and the UN Charter. And Russia has violated a lot of in this convention and in this international law, and also to the UN Charter. And what we have information right now, and as far as I know, that Ukraine filed a claim against Russia and at the International Court of Justice, or the ICJ, in late February 2022. And Russia's allegations that Ukraine was committing genocide in Donbass was refuted by this case, which also asked the court issue an injunction compelling that Russia to cease all military actions in Ukraine. The Geneva Convention, which is drafted in 1949 to replace the outdated Prisoners of War Convention of 1929 in response to the terrible lessons of World War II. And it expressly covers the prisoners of war. And what we have information right now is that both Russia and Ukraine have signed it, pledged their adherence to it under all circumstances. And since the Geneva Conventions for Protection of War Victims are ratified by Russia, the systematic and blatant violation of international humanitarian law continue to be committed in Ukraine by its military forces and the terrorist organizations it supports. And I'm looking it on a humanitarian into international law perspective, or on the scale of that, Ukraine's use of self-defense and requests for outside military support are both permissible actions, meaning it's all legal, they are bound by permissible actions because Russia is a permanent member with a veto, and the UN Security Council has been paralyzed, and the most deadly periods in world history have historically been initiated by eroding sovereignty standards. So, as for the final ruling, and with a decisive majority, the UN General Assembly has denounced, and Russia's plans to invade 4 areas of Ukraine. The resolution was already approved by 143 countries with 35 governments, and that includes China and India abstaining. And so far, that's an update regarding this conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
I just want to ask Ms. Aubrey, how about the actions or plans of other international tribunals regarding the conflict, like International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court? Is there any update in this conflict?
Okay, so the International Court of Justice or the International Criminal Court and the European Court Human Rights are the main international tribunals that may be involved in addressing Russia's actions in Ukraine. And as we all know, the ICJ or the International Criminal Court looks into allegations of genocide or war crimes, crimes against all humanity, and acts of aggression, and where necessarily it brings cases against those accused of the crime. So the ICC's investigations progress will undoubtedly draw a lot of attention and serve as a crucial test of the court's capacity to conduct efficient investigations of crimes while the conflict is still in progress. So there are 2 declarations from the Ukrainian government, and it clearly recognizes the court's jurisdiction over crime, and as well as the recent referral from 39 states signatories to the Rome Statute, established the court's authority to look into the situation in Ukraine. And while on the other hand is the ICJ or International Court of Justice, if the International Court of Justice accept the Ukraine's invitation to the rule on the legality of Russia's invasion, a ruling the ICJ could provide a chance for a future Russian state to mend fences with its neighbors in Europe and gain some clarity regarding this accountability. And furthermore, given the difficulties in enforcing court rulings, it is difficult to predict if the ICJ's provisional measures and the ultimate judgment will be helpful in putting to an end into Russia's hostilities in Ukraine. However, I think it may be argued that the fact that the court's rulings and uphold international law at the same time, when it is being disregarded, is a benefit in it on itself. And because according to, I think if I'm not mistaken, according to the Article 36 of the ICJ statute, neither Russia nor Ukraine have publicly acknowledged their acceptance of the ICJ's mandatory jurisdiction. And therefore, the Genocide Convention, as I mentioned earlier, which both Russia and Ukraine have ratified, is the exclusive source of the ICJ's authority in the Ukraine case. Only in the Ukraine case. And since Russia's led forces are allegedly involved in extrajudicial executions of civilians, there are kidnappings, tortures, forced disappearances, and other instances of harsh and very inhumane, and we can all imagine, or humiliating treatment or punishment in the conflict in Donbass region that Russia initiated and exacerbated. And that is where the European Convention on Human Rights, or the ECHR, as we all know, it is the body that hears complaints about alleged transgressions of fundamental freedoms and human rights. And Russia and Ukraine were both parties to this convention at the time of filing, but Russia is not already part of its convention. In addition to that, the convention protects a variety of human rights as well, including the right to life and an end to torture and other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment. Although actions that violate this convention protected rights may occur during incidents that also give rise to allegations of war crimes or crimes against humanity, human rights violations are distinct from violations of international humanitarian law. And the ECHR may impose temporary restrictions on the accused violating state law when there is a risk of immediate and irreparable harm. I think that would be all, and thank you so much for having me here.
From a humanitarian view, the war between Russia and Ukraine was a complete violation of civil rights in a sovereign state. Whatever the cause of the war, Russia's murders of hundreds of thousands of innocent civilians can never be justified. Many people will be killed, many regions will be conquered, and many more will disappear. The sanctions imposed by international organizations, the refugee crisis, and the recovery of weapons and defenses expenses are all likely to impact both economies significantly. However, the amount of assistance needed in the case of Ukraine may be tremendous that economic growth per state will be very challenging to achieve. And that sums up all the news for the day. I am Juliana Reyes. This has been ISEA Point 29 News, your partner in international news.
Ang susunod na programa ay rated PG. Ito ay nangangailangan ng patnubay at gabay ng magulang para sa mga batang manonood.